It was quite some time back that we presented on this channel for the first time the presidential candidate, the prospective presidential candidate, former Chief Justice David Maraga. Now, of course, this suggestion was not received very well by all of us on this channel. And therefore, it is quite interesting that today, as I put together this recording, the voices, the masses, the support for the former Chief Justice is building up very fast. In fact, is being called the Gen Z candidate. Many analysts agree that he is the favored candidate to get widespread support from the Gen Zs in the country, who are very many, who are on course to deciding the future of our country, who are not aligned to any tribe, although our politicians are trying very hard to stick to tribes. Bwana Maraga, David Maraga, is the favored candidate. But actually the bad news for anybody else with presidential ambitions is that the support for David Maraga goes well beyond the Gen Zs. The support for David Maraga has a lot to do with the mood in the country. It also has a lot to do with a very steep learning curve Kenyans have gone through in recent months and recent weeks. Let me explain. And I believe we have said this before on this channel. Okay? When historians sit down to write the history of Kenya and write about this very painful period we're going through, they will say something that may sound very surprising to you right now. I believe they're going to say that the presidency of William Samoei Ruto was very important for Kenya, played a very key, positive, important role in the history of the country called Kenya. Because more than anything else, Ruto has brought Kenyans together. Oh yes, he has brought Kenyans together against him. He has brought Kenyans together against the political class. And very important, President Ruto's excesses have caused the eyes of Kenyans to open very wide. President Ruto's excesses have caused Kenyans to wake up very quickly and to be able to see very clearly what is happening in a way that would not have been possible and at a speed that would not have been possible any other way. You see, when you're suffering, when you're hungry, you pay attention. When you're going through so many difficulties, you pay attention. And you're a very good student. And Kenyans have very quickly learned that tribal politics is to the huge advantage of politicians. They provoke tribal sentiments. They divide us so that they can rule us more effectively. They divide us so that they can win general elections. Let me give you the perfect example. You go to the house of Mumbi, Murema, the Kikuyu community, and you tell them that Raila Odinga is a threat. That it is very obvious the way things are going, that Raila Odinga is going to win the general election, which is usually factual. And when he wins the general election, this Mjaruo, do you know what he's going to do to you as a community? Of course, use the right words. You're trying to provoke tribal animosity against another tribe. You know what he's going to do? He's going to force all Kikuyus to wear kaptulas. So the rest of the Kenyans will be wearing trousers as usual, but all Kikuyus, it will be a legal requirement that they wear shorts. And guess what? As ridiculous as that sounds, the community takes that as gospel truth. The community falls for that one. And as those tribal emotions are still on the rise, you bring in other points. You explain to the Kikuyu community how the Luo community are not good people, etc., etc. You capitalize on their weaknesses. Everybody has weaknesses. Every community in Kenya has weaknesses. You capitalize on their weaknesses, especially the weaknesses which are repugnant to the Kikuyu community. I'm sure you know what I mean. And so what happens on voting day? The Kikuyu community come out and vote in large numbers for you who has incited them. They even carry the sick admitted in hospital to make sure that they come and cast their votes. They do everything in their power. The turnout is crazy because you have awakened their tribal emotions. That is how people have been winning general elections in Kenya. Yeah? Or at least setting the stage to rig to win general elections in Kenya. That is the truth. So Kenyans have realized that. They have realized that when the price of fuel, petrol, is so high, it is not different for a Kalenjin. They are not buying fuel at a lower price than somebody from the coast, for instance. Mkamba is not paying less for unga than somebody from Western Kenya. We are all suffering together as the people of Kenya. Kenyans have learned that lesson very quickly. The political class are in great panic because their most powerful weapon in winning general elections is gone. Poof! Imeenda. Okay? And that is why the possible candidacy of former Chief Justice David Maraga for the presidency of the Republic of Kenya should excite all of us. For starters, he comes from a community that does not have large numbers. So automatically, that should take away tribal debates from the table when he's campaigning. Yeah, I believe that is important. Because, for instance, if he came from one of the big tribes, it would be very easy, yeah, to start a campaign, a narrative, yeah, pitting those two tribes against each other, which would lose that particular candidate votes. But Maraga comes from a minority community, the Kisi. So that is perfect. And of course the political class are very much aware of this. And they're panicking. And by the way, I also mean the intelligence community. Because they like to stay in control. They like to be sure. They like to create narratives and to organize things for an expected outcome. But then with a candidate like David Maraga on the ballot, hey, it messes a lot of things. It makes a lot of things completely unpredictable. And most importantly, it makes Maraga a formidable opponent. The opponent to beat in the next presidential elections. But the biggest advantage Maraga brings to the table for the country called Kenya, and the biggest advantage for him, is the fact that Kenyans have realized that the big problem we have with our leaders is that we do not have leaders with integrity. Actually, we don't have leaders. Yeah? Let alone people with integrity. We don't have leaders. And these people who are not leaders don't have integrity. And that's why Kenyans are thirsting for integrity. And this time around, Kenyans will not want to hear stories of nimepanga, nimetenga, I will do this. No. They want evidence. What have you done in the past? And David Maraga is famed worldwide for being the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court that nullified the election of a president in Black Africa. That was very big news. It's still a very big deal to this day. And you know, it was not easy for him. He was harassed. He was intimidated. In fact, I'll tell you a very interesting story. During the repeat election, which Maraga ordered, Maraga went to cast his vote. And guess what? The intelligence community followed him. They wanted to know who he was going to vote for. Yeah, of course, so that they can have the excuse of saying Maraga favored Raila, and that is why the ruling in the Supreme Court was in favor of Raila. But you see, Maraga also has wisdom. When Maraga went to vote, according to my sources, do you know who he voted for? He voted for Uhuru Kenyatta and not Raila Odinga. He did the right thing. Yeah, and therefore he quashed, he destroyed any arguments anybody would want to bring in later to accuse him of favoring any candidate. You know, we should never forget that in our country called Kenya, we still have some very powerful people whose thinking is still very tribal. Yeah? People would think as follows. Maraga is from Kisii. Kisii is in Nyanza. The same Nyanza where Raila is coming from. Huyu mtu ana support wa Jaruo. That is why he nullified the election. He's supporting Raila. It is nothing to do with the evidence presented before him. And we're going to prove it to you. Yeah? We're going to see who is going to vote for. Yeah? So immediately Maraga cast his vote. They rushed to the ballot box to try and retrieve his vote. And voila! He voted for Uhuru. I really like that. So integrity is at the top of the list for anybody who wants to seek political office in the next election in Kenya. And Maraga has the track record. In fact, believe it or not, there are very few prominent Kenyans with a track record that is stronger, that is more impressive than David Maraga on the subject of integrity. Now I know people shoot back and say he has always defended fellow judges, he has always defended people in the judiciary, etc., etc. But hey, this man is human, and we are looking at his record. We are looking at what is on paper. And on paper, Maraga on integrity scores very high. He will be the candidate to beat, and therefore is the candidate to protect against mischief by those who want to stop the new Kenya at all costs. I am sure you have a very good idea of exactly what I mean. Please allow me to leave it there. Now, if you've not yet taken in my very latest special report titled The Next President of Kenya, and indeed if you've already taken it in, if you go back to that special report and then you look at it alongside, you will begin to understand the nitty-gritty of how Kenya is operating these days and where we are and how the situation is very crazy for motherland. Now you can see details on your screens right now. For only Kenya shillings 1,999 or $16, you can get this very valuable special report. And not only this special report, other very relevant special reports to this latest development, including the assassination of the immediate former chief of the Kenya Defense Forces, General Ogola. It is super fascinating, in fact more than fascinating, that particular special report, highly controversial, highly sensitive, that I put together so many months ago, has stood the test of time. And therefore this is a very valuable package that you must have. Okay, so please act quickly as we're in the final hours of making available this highly sensitive information. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.